Hi, my name's Dave and I am Military Dial Armour. Welcome to my channel. In this video I'll be taking this Trumpeter 1:35 scale KV1 from bare plastic to a fully modulated paint job. So let's get started. The next step is priming the kit. You have three main options for this. You've got liquid acrylic primer, a rattle can or aerosol primer, or a liquid metal primer. I use liquid metal primer mainly on metal gun barrels and photo etch parts, but not on photo etch grills, as this will block up the mesh. I use aerosol primer for kits with lots of resin or photo etch parts. I use acrylic primer for any of the priming jobs, such as just a plain kit or kits that have got texturing on. I always prime my kits as it gives any further painting a good solid surface to adhere to, and also a nice even coat. Also, it shows up any blemishes in the construction that you can fix before you commit to paint. The next step is removing any loose parts from the kit to make it easy to paint. In this instance I'm removing the wheels, the fenders and the turret. As the kit has only got turret texture on it, I've decided to use a Vallejo acrylic primer, which is Russian green or 4BO, and it is 70609. I'm also using a hard-on Steinbeck Evolution Silverline airbrush, which has got a 0.4mm needle and set to around 25 to 30 psi. The air pressure isn't that important as long as when you're spraying the paint it's coming out in a nice smooth even coat and it's not splittering. You need to paint the kit in multiple thin layers and constantly move the kit and the airbrush so you don't get build-up of paint, but it's also important to make sure you get all of the kit covered, all the hidden parts, and like I say, just do it in nice thin coats. I normally start with the turret, move on to the lower hull, and then do the other parts like the wheels and the fenders, and then by the time they're done the turret's dry again, and I'll repeat the process, laying down 3 or 4 nice thin even coats until the kit is completely covered in a nice smooth and thin layer of paint. The paint that I'm using is going to be used as the base coat and also the shadow coat, so I'll use the same paint and lighten it for the subsequent modulation effects. I'll just go to lighten it with possibly yellow or a dirtyish yellow like German dark yellow, because if you use just plain yellow then it will be a very bright change, but if you use a dirty yellow like German Dunkelgelb then it will be more of a dirty non-bright yellow, but it will still have the effect of lightening the paint. Then once you're happy with the primer coat, it's time to move on to the modulation. Like I say, I'm going to lighten this Russian 4BO, which is 70609, with Dunkelgelb, which is 70604. I've already mixed the paints up and I'm just checking here. I've got a dot of paint which is the base colour, which is the Russian 4BO, and I'm just checking to make sure that there's enough change in the colour to make it noticeable. I don't want a massive change, just a small modulation. Once I'm happy with the paint and the change in colour, I start painting the running gear and just put a little dot of paint on the inside of it to create a bit of a lighter space. And then moving on to the turret, I apply the paint to the lower parts of the turret and just parts where you'd have a bit more of a shadow, because this is just slightly lighter than the original colour, and I just want to get the modulation started and start adding a few highlights as it were, but not going over the top. And also applying it into the inside of panels, working out, and as I build up the lightness of the colour I'll reduce the amount of paint that I apply, and I'll just add more and more of the German dark yellow to the paint to lighten the colours. And as you get lighter you also increase the angle you spray at so that you get very little of the highlight paint on the lower parts of the tank or the running gear and concentrate it on the upper parts. Here I'm using a piece of plastic card to get a nice transition on the panels, so you you get a sharp line, which is quite a good tip to use. You can also use masking tape. I just find it easier sometimes with the plastic card, just to give it a nice straight edge and a nice transition. Also, when you're modulating the paint, you can also use vertical streaks, especially on the lower hull and the sides of the turret, not so much on the top of the tank. But if you do apply the paint vertically, then you can start to introduce streaking effects. Also, on the side of the tank, I'm trying to stay away from the lower part where the fender will attach. I should have masked it off, but I didn't think to. But so that the lower part of the hull under the fenders is darker than the upper part. As I lighten the paint with more of the Dunkelgelb, I focus on smaller parts of the upper hull and also just on smaller parts of the panels, so that you've got a nice modulation going from darker on the edges to a lighter colour. And then once you leave that to dry and you're happy with the effect you have, it's time to move on to brush highlights. It's time to move on to the brush highlights, and for this I just lighten the Russian 4BO, the lighter colour that I've got for the highlights. I lighten again with even more of the Dunkelgelb and just apply it to the raised areas like the vision slits, grab handles, the edges of panels, and just raise detail to give it an extra highlight. I also use 2 different or 3 different tones, so you've got variation as well. It looks quite stark, but once you apply a mist coat, which is basically the lightest colour mixed with 95% varnish, you give it just a quick mist coat and it will unify all the colours and bring them all together. But also the weathering steps you do after this will bring all the colours together and dull them down. You can also use an oil wash to do the same thing as a mist coat, but I just prefer using a mist coat. I love doing this process. It does take quite a long time, but I find it very therapeutic. I do this over the entire kit. The upper hull, I focus on bolt heads and also raised detail like the extra armour they put on to stop the shells going under the turret, but just picking out all little details, bolt heads, lifting hooks, anything, panel edges, just to give it a little bit of a pop and just make the part stand out, and it will really give it a good look when you've finished the painting process. I also do it on the running gear, picking out the bolt head details, again using more than one colour, picking out edges of the wheels and stuff and just giving it a lot more detail, a lot more pop, and it will really make, like I said, a big difference when you've finished the model. It does take a lot of time, but it is worth it. Well, that's it for this video. Next week's video will be on pre-shading, which will be another KV tank. I'm quite looking forward to that. It's something I don't normally do, but I did enjoy doing this, and that is next week's video. I will leave you some stills of the finished article so you can have a look. Please feel free to like and leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you next week.